Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. Today we're talking about something that many of us never really pay much attention to, yet it's at the center of how we move through the world. We're talking about the relationship we have with ourselves, not the one we present to the world, not the one built on productivity or people pleasing, the one that's mostly hidden. It's the foundational relationship that drives how safe we feel, how we respond to setbacks, and how much compassion we offer ourselves when life gets hard. Joining me for this conversation is Kerisma Vere, a holistic wellness coach, author, and the founder of Towards Wellness Coaching. Kerisma's approach is trauma-informed, non-prescriptive, and built from a place of hard-won wisdom from dealing with her own trauma, mental health challenges, and addiction. She's the author of The Light Switch Myth, Contemporary Approaches to Creating Lasting Change, a book that gently dismantles the all-or-nothing thinking that so many of us has been handed and replaces it with something far more honest and sustainable. She's also created the companion journal, Ways I Showed Up for Myself, and the 7-module course, From Pressure to Path, a compassionate framework for change. Her work consistently asks the question that I think sits at the heart of midlife for many women. What if you stopped trying to fix yourself and started learning to actually be yourself? In this episode, we'll explore why prioritizing the relationship we have with ourselves is not indulgent but essential, especially for women in midlife who have spent decades caring for everyone else. We'll talk about healing without pressure, growth without shame, and what it really means to show up for ourselves in small, sustainable ways. Kerisma, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Marianne. It's great to be here. These are such wonderful conversations for me to listen to and be a part of.
I feel the exact same way, and I'm especially thankful that you were able to come today. So just in case anybody hears Kerisma, she's just getting over a cold, and we all know how that feels. So we're gonna get through this and make it the best conversation, but we know that she's just getting over the cold, so we'll give her some grace around that. I would love it if we could start this conversation by having you reflect a little bit back on your own life's journey and share some of the highlights that sort of led you into this work.
I'm one of those people that had the first 20 years of life. There was rather extreme trauma, particularly relational trauma, but other kinds. And I was in survival most of my life, and I was fairly dissociative, and I know for me that's a big part of the story. And it is for many women, but other women, it's more just a matter that we've been conditioned that, having prioritizing the relationship with ourselves is somehow bad, right? Or selfish, or I've reclaimed that word selfish. Anyway, I came out and I was trying to function in the world and trying to do the best that I could, and I was in therapy, and I was out there trying to build good relationships. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a house. I wanted to have a good career. And I did have some really good relationships, but I didn't really ever have a lot of friends. And I found it really difficult finding people that, just being a part of things in general. And my efforts to go to school, I kind of burned out a couple of times, overwhelming, and a lot of different kinds of things happened. And I think it was in about 2014 I stepped up to I was helping another woman who had a company called Dynamic Awakening, and I was really helping her get things going. And I stepped up myself as a coach and put about a year's worth of work into that. And things seemed to be going really, really well. I was early 40s, and I was working out 5, 6 times a week. I'd never worked out in my life, and I was discovering my body, and and it was really fantastic, and I lost about 80 pounds because I had gained a lot of weight. I was able to lose 80 pounds slowly and steadily, through improving my nutrition, through learning about emotional eating, through getting in touch with my whys, and through the movement piece, right? And I had a thriving coaching practice, and I forget. I think there was some other things going well too. I had 14 years clean and sober, and things started to happen. And like my marriage had fallen apart a year prior to that, but I had gotten up and kept going. Like wasn't gonna let that stop me. But a whole bunch more things happened, and it just was one thing after another. And my nervous system shut down. I started seeing things through the lens that I had when I was a child. I got very small. I got very unwell. I ended up in a relationship with a rather severe narcissist, and I wasn't really aware of that. I like to say that that was my kryptonite because it just brought me right back to where I was when I was a child. And despite knowing so despite having fought so hard to build my life, I wasn't really able to maintain it. Some things happened, and I relapsed on smoking cigarettes, and well, you can't really be a health coach with any kind of integrity if you're smoking. And it also makes cardio really, really difficult. So, that's those started to wheedle off. And the lens that I had of expected rejection and hurt and stuff like that was affecting my relationships. But also, I was in a 12-step program, and I don't think anybody actually had the skills for the kind of mental health that was coming arising in me, So even though I was reaching out, I was doing all the right things, I wasn't getting any kind of help. And like eventually it led to like a complete nervous breakdown. And during that I ended up relapsing and just sort of hit a new time bottom, and I felt so betrayed because, I had overcome, and, I thought this was my time. I was finally getting to live life. I was finally getting to, like enjoy. And, I thought that I had a new relationship with myself and everything. So I felt so betrayed by things. But luckily I went through a series of not being able to find help, and then I did find some good help, and then it was a very slow rebuild. And that's sort of where the new version of the coaching comes from, is having these newer ideas of what change looks like, having these newer ideas of what healing actually is and wholeness actually is, and understanding that that relationship with myself, it's not about getting rid of parts. It's not about fixing parts. It's not it's actually about learning how to be in relationship with all of those parts of myself with kindness and compassion. Not where I let them run the show, but where I can hear them, where I can validate in them and acknowledge them and accept this is all of me with like an unconditional kind of regard. So I will often now call my breakdown a breakthrough because
Mm.
I was very stubborn up until that point, and that's what it kind of took, including my relationship to help. I think I was about 48 when I came to, like it just at that point, it was just like clearly the things I had done to heal and to build they hadn't worked, so I was humbled. I was humbled in a way I never had been in my entire life, and was willing to accept that, I really was going to have to do things differently.
Mm. I think there's so many things in there that I just love and I want to touch on, but let's see if I can pull out a few. So when you talked about like learning to live with all of your pots and not fix them, one of the things that I love to think of it this way, I don't think we're ever done. So even though, when you had the relapse and you said you thought you were healed, you thought you had gotten through all that stuff. I mean, personally for me, and I'm not a doctor, therapist, or anything, but I just don't think we're done. And I think it's always going to be an up and down kind of thing, and things creep in and you work on them and you get them back to a better state, and then you move on and something else will. I mean, I just think it's an ongoing
Yeah.
evolution for anybody that wants
Yeah.
to evolve. Certainly there's people that don't, and that's okay. But for those of us that want to continue to evolve, I think it's an ongoing thing.
That's in the book, and that's part of the mindset is when we have the mindset of success and failure as these very binary kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And we see any kind of like setback as a failure, like it's not doing us any favors to see things like that because life actually is an up and down and taking a few steps back. And,
Yeah.
instead of now calling it a setback, I call it I'm revisiting something. Right?
Yeah.
Something more to learn here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's true. So I like, and I have the some of the qualities that I think are really important to develop with ourselves are like one is compassion, another is patience,
Yeah.
not the false version of patience, but genuine patience. Like, okay, you're not there yet. Or okay, like you weren't able to do that today. Or okay, I know you're trying to learn this, or it's just like genuine patience gives us grace. And
Yeah.
then another quality I find can emerge out of like this kind of self-work that is so helpful is curiosity.
Hmm.
And it's not that the critic goes away, but when we can start to come in with curiosity and go, oh, why
Yeah.
didn't I go to the gym today? Or why did I have two donuts instead of one donut, right? Or why did I, just yell at my best friend or any like if we can actually wonder what's going on for ourselves, it puts us in a different kind of place where we can start to
Yeah.
problem solve those things, particularly if we're doing it with compassion and not this pressure, but just like okay, so these were the pieces involved with that. Like, okay, let's brainstorm how we can, move past that or work with that.
Yeah. Another one that you talk about, which ties back to where I was going with the beginning, is around having gratitude for self. Because when you talked about
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
to live with all your parts, I think the thing I was trying to say is, and I constantly work on, is having gratitude for all of those versions of you that brought you to this place, right? So it doesn't mean I want to go back and be my 40-year-old self or go back to the time where I was working through something or having a traumatic event. It doesn't even mean that I'm happy with all of the way it played out, but to be able to find the gratitude in what it brought you today. So other understanding, a better understanding, a deeper understanding, a different way to move through the world, whatever it is. I think if you can do that, it really helps you learn to live, to your point, live with all those parts, even the parts that you don't quote unquote like, right? You can at least be grateful for them and what they brought you.
It's true. It's like, so much of this is about awareness and perspective. And,
Mm,
you know, um, I find with the clients I work with and with myself and with many people, sometimes, particularly to start with, we need a little bit of help to shift our perspective
yeah,
because we've been seeing things a certain way our whole life. But, I can now go back pretty much to my entire life and see things now from a lens of like compassion and understanding,
yeah.
right? It's like, okay, so yeah, you always struggled with, I've never been much of a house cleaner, but that wasn't a character defect, and that wasn't even from a lack of desire. It had to do with that 90% of my energy was going into coping with the trauma. We
Mm-hmm.
have a finite amount of energy every day, and society teaches us to sort of only acknowledge it in certain ways, but really our nervous system, our emotions, our mental health, those things all can burn up a lot of energy. And then we might look at, where we're not really functioning as well as we think that we are and judge and blame. But if we can really come in with the kind of understanding that me and you are talking about is like, oh yeah, and you know what? That was my capacity at the time. I was doing the best that I could. And I've kind of yet to meet a person. I guess every once in a while we flop down in the coach and we don't necessarily do the best that we could. But I would even argue that that is because we need those moments too. And just further, like for me, when I first had my breakdown, I was so in a place of everything that had happened was I was seeing it through. I was blaming and shaming myself for absolutely everything that had happened. Like my marriage had ended, this had ended, that had happened, this exploded, blah, blah. And it was all my fault. And I was putting myself down and beating myself up. And when you're already in distress and you're already upset, whatever the situation is, if you add all of those layers, it just makes it that much worse, right? So I had help realizing, and there's a lot of handouts on different kinds of distorted thinking. And I remember getting the one and it had 12 different things and I was doing them all, right? I was doing the minimization, I was doing the catastrophizing, I was doing the black and white thinking. I was, I was doing it all, but But that was great because it allowed me to slowly kind of change that and get back on track. But the self-gratitude I usually talk about is more of the day-to-day thing that kind of addresses that criticism, and it helps us kind of rebuild a relationship with ourselves, And I find particularly people in midlife, particularly women, it's just like we've never had the freedom or the luxury to prioritize the relationship with ourselves.
Hmm.
And for whatever, regardless of the cause, many of us have been in survival our entire lives. We've either been meeting the needs of everybody else, or we've just been like working so hard to keep the roof over our head or just keep it all together, right?
Yeah.
So when we lay down at bedtime, what I noticed for me and many other people is like you go over your day and you're like, "Ooh, what did I do wrong? Where did I mess up?" Like it's from this lens of threat, which is intended. It's meant to help. It's meant to keep me out of trouble. It's meant to make sure that I didn't leave the stove on and I'm going to burn the house down, right? It's there for a very good reason. However, when we lay down at night and we go through our day from this lens of threat and fear and anxiety and all the rest of that, then unfortunately that actually sets us up to not have the greatest of sleep.
Hmm.
And then when we don't have the greatest of sleep, we wake up with diminished capacity, and we're more likely to have more things to ruminate about the next night.
Hmm.
And again, it reinforces that type of relationship with ourselves that is primarily kind of critical, anxiety and fear-based,
Hmm.
threat-based, right? So this exercise was given to me by my counselor actually, and I've done it for most of the last 7 years, and it's been transformational. And I love that it's not only on a personal level, but it actually helps rewire your brain, right? So at the end of the night, you don't need the journal to do it, but I made it into a journal because I know a lot of the people I work with, they sort of struggle to remember these questions or to shift, and most of us are already so overwhelmed. The simpler things can be as an entry point, then the easier. So
Yeah.
it's got an introduction and then it's got 8 prompts and that's it. The first one is like, what was difficult today? And it's what's difficult for me, not my mom, not my friends, not what society says should be difficult. It's like, what was actually difficult for me? Maybe it was actually difficult waking up because I had nightmares, or maybe it was difficult going for a walk. Like it could be whatever. And another question is, what took a little bit of extra courage today?
Mm.
We all do things that took a little bit of courage,
Yeah.
whether it was make a phone call about a bill, or talk to a friend about something difficult, or set a boundary with a partner, or maybe it was even just like having a glass of water before we drank a cup of coffee. I put in there too, like, what was one thing I maintained today? Because all of us on that self-help journey of trying to improve our lives, how often do we stop and give credit for the things that we incorporated last year and we're still doing?
Yeah.
It's like, no, 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 no. I'm not giving myself credit for that.
Yeah.
I've set the bar higher and I'm focused on here.
Yeah.
And we so get into that, like, where we're falling short. But what I find is where we're falling short has these layers, makes it harder to do anything, drains our energy, dysregulates our nervous system. Whereas if we can start to learn to have this voice that recognizes the ways that we are showing up for ourselves, it snowballs the opposite way. It builds confidence, agency, a little bit of pride. We feel seen, we feel heard, we feel supported. And the nice thing about that too is that when we learn how to give that stuff to ourselves, it's bonus when we get it from somebody else. But it sort of gives us a little bit of a healthier type of armor. And if I say something to you and you don't really, respond the way that I want you to, I'm not as sensitive to that
Yeah.
because I already, like I'm good with me. I already gave myself that big hug for that. It's like, all right, you don't get it, but I get it.
So you talked about self-compassion a few times in there. And I think sometimes you have to look at self-compassion. Well, in the lens that you looked at, I think is one thing, but I think sometimes people can think of it in the way that we're lowering standards to avoid responsibility. So,
Yeah, okay.
okay, I said I was going to exercise. I didn't exercise. Well, be compassionate to yourself.
That's not
Give yourself
compassion.
grace. Right. So I want to talk about that. Like, what do you call the difference between self-compassion and I guess I'll call it self-avoidance? Like, where's that line? How do you define that line?
Because compassion is like these other things, they tend to be narrower focused, right? So if I didn't go to the gym and I said, oh, well, one, I didn't try to think about it, or well, maybe I just gave up on the goal, or I said, oh, it's not important. That actually wouldn't be compassion. That's not actually truthful. But whereas if I woke up and well, we'll take me for example, right? I had gotten back to the gym and then I got a cold, so I can't go, right? So I compassion holds accountability. But if we think of ourselves almost like with children, right? It's just like, hey, you said you were going to clean your room, and I notice your room's not clean. What is going on, right? Do you need a little
Yeah.
help? Do you need a reminder? What's happening for you there? We don't it's compassion's not letting ourselves off the hook. So, there's a few things that go into this for me. It's like, my goals for change are based in my values. I'm very clear on my whys, okay? The reasons why I do it. So it would not be compassion of me to ignore those or deny them or anything. So if I'm not going to do a behavior that is important to me, because it would not be compassionate to pretend like it isn't important to me, right? But I also want to be understanding that I have limited capacity, I have other responsibilities, I have ups and downs, I have things that affect me, right? So I want to take into consideration that whole picture, but I also want to hold myself accountable. It's just like, okay,
Yeah.
hey, Charisma, like, I know this is really important to you. So what can we do? Or like, I get, wow, I'm willing to understand that you didn't go to the gym today. And maybe that was just because you were feeling grumpy or you were in your like little defeatist kind of attitude at the timer, and maybe you just didn't want to. It's like, okay, all right, I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I got that. But let's be real, there's consequences, right? You've got some health things going on. Movement is part of how you're going to address that. This is the bigger picture that is important to us. So, how do we make sure this happens? Like, I'll adapt from if I don't want to go out of the house, instead of going to the gym, I was just like, I'll do some stretches and mobility at home, right? Like it's that compassion is like meeting myself where I at and working with me.
Mm.
It's negotiating and it's compromising, but it is being that accountable. But it's just that rather than the voice going, you messed
Yeah.
up, you should, you need to, you're lazy, those kinds of things, the voice says, hey, I know this is really important to you. I know you're not feeling so good right now that you didn't do that, or something got in the way, or I know this is really important to you, so that I know you're feeling bad about this. How can I help you?
Yeah.
How can I help you do this, right? Instead of coming in with that voice that basically, you're already standing in a hole, and the voice comes and it stands over top of you and goes, see you down in the hole? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Here you are again.
you messed
Yeah.
up. You shouldn't be in that hole.
Yeah.
We would like come over and like, oh, you're in the hole again. Here, let me throw you a rope.
I really like that. I like the reminder too that to talk to yourself or think of yourself about the way you would talk to a child, because I think that is one of the easiest ways for people to get the right perspective and to just sort of keep that lens. Anytime you start to feel yourself, pull away from that, just think about that. Like if you were talking to a kid, whether it's yours or just the neighbors that, you like, how would you talk to that kid? You wouldn't say half the things you say to yourself. So I love that.
I know, and let's just talk about that for a second, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners have maybe said this at one point in their life. I know how to be nice to everybody else, but I'm not that way to myself.
Yeah.
And then that's as far as we go with it, right? We just think that that's it. Well, here's the thing, okay? You already have the skills, but yes, it actually takes a bit of a commitment on your part that you're going to start treating yourself differently.
Hmm.
And then again, like, let's move out of that instant transformation kind of thing and
Yes.
understand this takes practice. The
Yes.
first step is awareness. Like, oh, there I go again.
Yes.
Like, oh, okay, that's how I responded. And then we can pause. I always like to think awareness.
Yep.
Then we move into the learning to take a pause
Yep.
phase. And then
Same.
we move into like, I have a choice. It's like, okay, when you call me names, that hurts. When you put me down, that hurts. When you add pressure, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
When you judge me or blame me, that really doesn't help. So I understand you're trying to help me. I really do. And I understand this is the way that we have always done things, but it doesn't really work for me. And I want something different for myself. So, okay, maybe I'll offer myself a kind word right now. Maybe I'll just kind of like see if I can expand my perspective from that compassionate lens and say, well, is there anything about this situation where I could offer myself a little bit of kindness or a
Yeah.
little bit of support or encouragement, right? So, but it isn't something that happens overnight.
No.
And if we think about our relationships with other people, they didn't happen overnight either. We actually put time and effort into it. And sometimes we messed up, and
Yes.
we saw that look on their face and we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't a good thing to say.
Such great points. And I know for myself personally, I didn't even realize some of the things that I say about myself, right? But you do it for 100 years. So you just 100, well, you know what I mean? But the more you practice it, the more you do catch yourself. And it is about catching yourself and then taking the pause and then learning to change the perspective. And then maybe next time you will be just a little less, unkind to yourself. But I think it's such an important point that it doesn't just happen overnight. It just doesn't.
One of the tools that works really well when you're early on in that kind of changing and shift is to stop and ask yourself, whose ruler am I measuring this by?
Yeah.
Is this my ruler? Is this my mom's ruler? Is
Yeah.
this society's ruler? Is this my partner's ruler?
Yeah.
Is this my kid's ruler?
All the rulers. It's all the rulers.
Maybe I should use my own ruler.
Yeah, maybe we should get a new ruler, right?
Yeah, maybe we should make a new ruler.
Probably the most accurate of them. It's such good stuff. I'm curious. I'm sure there's a lot because I know for me there was a lot. But what's the standout thing? I love the word unlearn. I think this is such a time of unlearning. And as much as we're learning, we're unlearning, right? Because we're undoing all the things, all the baggage, all the messaging. What was a big or something that stands out for you that you had to unlearn to sort of shift your perspective and the way you walk through the world?
Can I give you two?
Yeah.
I had to unlearn that I can do it all on my own, right? I can't. I
That's a good
actually,
one.
I actually friggin' need help.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I had to unlearn, which I still laugh about, is the perfectionism thing, you know,
Ugh,
where I set the bar so high and I expect myself to be able to do it perfectly. It doesn't work. And
it's not even
it,
real. And
no,
why didn't we
exactly.
get
It's a
that?
fantasy. So it's like it becomes almost comical if you
Ugh,
realize, like if you're into trying to get it done the best way and the most efficient way and all the rest of that, but you've been using a model that is totally not based in reality,
yeah.
then like you need to kind of like you need to learn like, hey, because I love that. It actually plays into the part of me that likes to do things perfectly to understand that trying to get it perfectly doesn't work. Like,
Yes.
no, now to be perfect, I need to be imperfect.
Feed the beast. Yeah. It's again though, if we really take it apart and you back to your curiosity point and you get curious about how we got there. Now everybody will have their own story, but you can find the story and you can find the messaging that made you feel like you had to get it right. You had to be perfect. That's what you were striving for. And I think understanding that helps a lot, helps you shift a lot away from that. But
Yeah.
it's work to go there and go
There's
back
there's
and
so much research that, like most of our formative learning happens when we're but between 3 and 5, right?
yeah,
And
early.
if we think of ourselves a little bit like a computer, right? The software got written when we were really young. It's like it needs to be updated.
Yes. Yes.
And that's not one of these like, 30-second updates. That's one of these like, okay, we're gonna have to sit here for hours and let it update, you know? And and really when in the case of humans, it's one little update at a time. And you know what? Sometimes you download it and you get it or whatever, and then you get that little box that says, sorry, this didn't take, right? Error, error. So you have to fiddle around it. So And I'm always one to say that depending on your history and how deep some of these things go, like I can work with people, a lot of people, at the coaching level, and we can do like a lot of really deep level. For more extreme kind of cases, what I can do is be sort of a precursor or work with them while they're also working in therapy.
Yeah.
So, because some of us to look at those places deep down and change those core beliefs, we need like some professional help, right?
Yeah.
But a coach, there's so much you can do on your own through podcasts and other kinds of resources that are there. But I would just suggest that if you're continually getting stuck in the same place, even though you're putting your all into it, that's probably a really great place to also try to bring in some help,
Yeah.
right? And
That's a good point.
and even there, like for all the perfectionists, like you're 80% more likely to succeed in the change you're trying to create and maintain it if you engage good support in the practice.
Yeah.
So some of these things I think, well, okay, the efficacy goes up if I'm willing to do things differently. I was skeptical, I'd been hearing about it for years, and I really did believe like, if I start being nice to myself, that's it. It's just going to be on the couch eating bonbons forever, right? And I thought, like there's no way being nice to myself will work better as a motivation than cracking the whip. But I gave it a try, and reluctantly I gave it a try, and I was like, oh wow, these changes started happening quicker, easier. They were more lasting. One started to build on top of the other.
Yeah.
What I found in being kind to myself and meeting myself where I was at was my capacity and energy and my motivation actually went through the roof compared to like the being hard on myself actually just made me feel heavy and sad and depressed. And I would do things, but not ever in a place of truly enjoying them or anything, or rarely in a place from being able to sustain them.
I love that. It's so funny because I chuckled a little bit as you were saying that because I've talked about it on various shows throughout the cycle of doing this, that I definitely was somebody that rolled my eyes at some of the stuff that I talk about. And I truly believe in now because, again, perspectives change. And once you start doing some of the work and you start trying to really do some of these things that, we talk about and sort of incorporate them into your life, I think you really don't get it. You really don't get what they can do for you until you've really tried it and see how it.
No, and like for a lot of my life, I thought a lot of things wouldn't work and didn't work, and I think I attributed some of that to something wrong about me and other kinds of things. But then what I really came to understand this last decade was those things are possible. It's just that I didn't have the right tools and I didn't have the right support, and the model of trying to create the change that I was doing, the all or nothing, the instant kind of thing, and the pressure kind of techniques, like they don't work. So when I come in, like, changing your relationship to yourself. How many of us have felt like, well, I just am critical of myself and I'm not ever going to be able to change that? Because we kind of did. We tried to do that with affirmation. We tried to do that with like, willpower. I will just be nice to myself,
Yeah.
right? And these things, and when they didn't work, we sort of thought, oh, well, I'm stuck, that I'm not ever going to be able to change that. And it's just like, no, hey, it's worth revisiting these things and going like, okay, you know what? Maybe the way I was trying to change it is the problem, not the fact that that's something that I can't change. Because changing the relationship that you have to yourself to become one that's unconditionally loving and supportive and encouraging, with some accountable. I can be stern. I had a day the other day when I was like not feeling well in the sense that I didn't want to eat, but eating's such an important part of healing when you're sick. So I was like, fine, 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 and marched into the kitchen and did the adult thing and made myself something to eat. So, but I did that with a little bit of love in the holding space for the part of me that was like, didn't want to, you know. So yeah, so like all of these things, I think that particularly when it's come to changing the relationship with ourselves or prioritizing ourselves or learning how to treat ourselves the way we treat our friends, they are possible. but might be worth like having a look at how you've been trying to do it and maybe bringing in some new resources, definitely some support, and then remembering that it takes practice, the first time you say something nice to yourself, your entire system's gonna probably raise an eyebrow and go,
100%.
yeah, right. I don't believe you. You are a
Wait,
passing
what?
ship. Keep moving,
Yeah.
buddy.
It does it. And we've talked about this. It feels yucky. It feels weird. It feels, I don't know, all the things. It just doesn't feel natural because it's not what you're used to. So practice, just practice, practice, practice. And it gets easier and easier. I want to go back to your imagery around the computer system or the analogy was fabulous. And I imagery because in my head I'm thinking about somebody putting in the upgrade and then actually having a reboot the whole thing, right? When you're done, it says you have to restart the computer and then it reboots. So I loved that. And I know that you use imagery to help grasp concepts a lot. I think in the light switch myth, you've done that as well with some prominent images. Can you walk us through one of them as an example and share with us why do you think the images are so important for people to grasp the concepts?
Okay, so when we're children and when we're growing up and later in life, we internalize things. And it's not a two-dimensional thing, it's not a one-dimensional thing, it's a multi-dimensional thing, right? And so we're looking at our environment, we're interacting in our relationships, we're all of these kinds of things, and we're building these constructs, these beliefs that are like constructs, right? And they're these greater frameworks for things. So what I find when we're updating the software, so to speak, as adults, when we're trying to embrace new ideas of change, new ideas of ourselves, new constructs, basically, I find imagery can hold it a lot better than words because
Mm.
words are just accessing that cognitive part of our brain. I'm not going to go into right left brain because I'm just not feeling well enough to get that right now. But this is going beyond just our thinking brain. And it's going into like a more images for me can help us actually internalize the idea, right? Like they can really internalize the idea. So when I've always done something a certain way, it hasn't just been a sentence, like it's actually been an entire idea. So as I'm learning a new way, when I can I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of like this, right? And it gives me a way to internalize. It gives me a way to understand in a greater sense than just my brain. In the book, that they're all ones I have used, right? And they're personally to me. I think my favorite one is the staircase because we sit and struggle for say maybe 20 years because we wanted to like, maybe make more time for ourselves, right? Okay, we'll say that one. And every once in a while, we get determined, and we're like, that's it. I'm clearing my schedule and that's it. Everybody can just like, take a hike for a little while and just, this is it. Starting tomorrow, it's a new me, it's a new life, right? Probably happens in January, but we have this concept of wanting to jump from the bottom of the staircase to the top staircase comes from how important it is to us. It also comes from how deeply we have struggled. So we're wanting to get away from that struggle. We've got this place of pain and hurt and distress inside ourselves. And we think if we could just change it like that, then we're going to get away from that. We bend down and we jump as far as we can, and we might actually make it to the top of the staircase. Maybe we have to have a couple of hops along the way, but we're not stopping for anybody, right? And we get to that top and we're like, ha ha. And then you know what always happens? We always fall right back down to the bottom. And why? Because, in my opinion, my experience is we weren't ready to be there,
Yeah.
And let's just talk about that from a nervous system level, right? You were here, this was your comfort level. You just went flying up to that place. You're up there. Well, you don't feel safe there. You don't feel comfortable there. And you didn't take the time to develop the resources, the agency, the support system, the knowledge, everything you needed to be there, right? So nothing's going to sustain you staying there, right? And you're going to fall back down. You're going to blame yourself, shame yourself, which is just, going to take you forever.
Yeah.
Then if you get up and try it the exact same way, you're going to get these same results. So the staircase for me is like, hey, let's take it one step at a time. Let's hold on to the handrail whenever we feel a little bit shaky. If we ever get to a step and we're starting to feel like, oh, really uncomfortable, If we have that attunement that I also talk about, that, paying attention to what our body and our mind and our sensations and our emotions are telling us. It's like, oh, I'm not okay right now. We just need to take one step back down, maybe two, but usually just one will do it. It's like, oh, I can breathe again. From a nervous system, we're like, okay, that was too much. I'm activated. I'm going to take one step back down. I'm going to wait until my whole system settles. I'm feeling safe and calm and stable again. Like, okay, now I'm going to take another step back up. And that's how we climb. That's how we sustain each step that we go, right? And as we're doing that, we're building the infrastructure and the external structure that we need to maintain those changes. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I just want to take it to practical terms because you started out talking about making time for ourselves. So an example of that could be that you say you're going to do something with your girlfriends every single week. And so you put that into your schedule and you have to like kick several things out of your schedule to make that happen every single week. You start playing that out and it feels like too much. You're missing the kids' games. You're not able to see your husband, whatever. Okay, how about if I do it every other week? That's a step down, right? Does that feel better? Does that feel safe?
Yeah.
You could end up doing it once a month, right? And then maybe you do it once a month for a whole year. And now your schedule has shifted a little bit. So maybe you could do it every other week now or every 3 weeks. That's a practical example of how you would put that into play, right?
Oh, that's so brilliant, Marianne. Yes. Yes, and it is, and that willingness to when we've set a goal for ourselves, if it's causing more stress than, like the idea of seeing your girlfriends is bring some fun and joy
Yeah.
and relaxation, but it's just stressing you out.
Yeah. Which it can. It can. That's the reality, right? Like we're busy.
Yeah, many of us can cling on to
Yeah.
that, right? Whereas if we're willing to revisit and adjust the goal, exactly. That's the taking the step down, right? Or you can also kind of problem solve like, oh, okay, well maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule a 15-minute phone call once a week and I'm
Yes.
going to do an in-person thing once a month, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
once we're actually look at our entire situation realistically and we can let go of that things have to look a certain way for them to meet that measurement of success or something like that, then
Yes.
we can start to create, I call it personalized. Like, let's make a
Yeah.
plan that's personalized for me, right? If I was to coach somebody on, they wanted to eat better, right? If I give them a plan that requires 8 hours of food prep a week, but they work 60 hours a week, that's not going to help. They might try their darndest for a couple of weeks to please me, right? And to do it because it's so important to them. But like it's just, and eventually they're going to toss that out the window, get mad at me, and that's it.
Yeah. 100%. So I love to wrap the show by asking if there was only one message that our listener walked away with. What would you want it to be?
You have a right to prioritize the relationship with yourself. You have a right to put as much love and care into the relationship that you have with yourself as you have into all of the other ones in your life, because you are worthy and deserving of love, and that starts with you.
Great message. Thank you for sharing that and all of your experience and insight with us. Where can people find you? Where are you most active?
Well, I'm active all over the world, social world, but I think a good starting place is towardswellness.ca. That's my wellness hub, and you'll see the books and the courses and the contact me and the coaching.
All right. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well for folks. So thank you again for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Message in the Middle. I hope you found something in this conversation that reminded you that you're not alone and that midlife isn't about winding down. It's about waking up. You're not done. You're just becoming. If this episode speaks to you at all, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And if you're enjoying the show, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It really helps other women find this community and this podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.